just passed through the Red Sea. And Moses writes this song that he has the king of the Israelites sing. And in Exodus 15:3, he says, "The Lord is a man of war."
Good evening, everybody. Hope you can hear me. Thumbs up. Can we hear me? Okay, thank you. How was the volume level? Is it okay? We have 2 pages of notes tonight. Whatever am I going to talk about? I don't know if I can cover it all, frankly, in even an hour and a half. So we'll get as far as we go. As well. Morgan is on here. I'll see her in a few days here shortly. I guess Friday. So, Emily, long time no see. So, Emily, what did you get out of Lost Dog and whatever the heck that it was we did the puppy development?
That other thing. The puppy development, especially, I've been going back through my notes a lot because I have several clients that I'm seeing the phases that they missed in puppyhood and the development phases that they didn't get or didn't get the right things. So that's been really interesting to go back to the notes and compare them to several of the current clients that I have. I'm sorry, you kind of cut out there. I may not be able to hear you.
Me now? Hear me okay now?
There we go.
Okay. So how did Lost Dog go for you?
Yeah, Lost Dog has been really fascinating. Just so much information to keep going over and over again in the way that they think at all the different phases. I think it's really good information to have, but I also think that there's so much information I'm getting out of it that applies to dogs that aren't necessarily lost, just in the way that they think.
So the timing of hours, days, etc., applies in a lot of ways. Not just as not a dog that's just on a fun run or lost.
Right. Yeah, especially to the more fearful dogs.
Okay. Thanks, Emily. Appreciate it. Colonel Kelly, happy birthday belated to you, buddy.
Thank you, Nelson. I'm old. You?
I'm older.
That's true. I feel better already.
By a lot, actually. You're retired. And I'm just tired. There you go. Mm. Yeah, a couple of so last night at my martial arts class that I teach, I let I let the students know that I was unhappy. I've dropped a little bit of weight purposely and want to do about as much again. So about 14, 15 pounds at this point, another 14, 15 coming up, hopefully. At least 12. So, but I let them know that at my age, I'm not happy with my the shape of my muscles anymore. So I actually started on Monday going to the gym to do some weightlifting, and I haven't done that since I was probably 19 or 20 years old. So downhill quickly.
Yeah, I think the time and gravity and our mitochondria slowing down all contributes.
Yeah, there's lots of things that contribute, including the mileage. I got lots of mileage, let me tell you. So yeah, so I figured I would go ahead and start. My wife goes there about 4 times a week anyway for different stuff, and she's done really well. So I started joining her at least on Mondays and Fridays so that I can kind of keep up a tonal value. But I was actually kind of surprised. I haven't lost that much strength. It's just the tonal density that uh, that I think has happened. So I'll work on that a little bit. I don't want to give in to that starting my 8th decade on Earth stuff.
Good for you. That's good.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's get started here, guys. Looks like everybody's kind of on board with whatever. So this came to mind a while back. I talk about territory and aspects of it from the dog standpoint, and understanding how important it is for us to understand the way they think about it and the results of it, and observing, domestic and ancient and all of that, looking at their behaviors on their terms out in the wild or in domestic situations, and trying to interpret those things from the way they behave, act, and not from human influence, then this is what I want to share with you. So we'll dive into this here shortly. And first aspect of this is about the wolf and the dog ancestors. Not 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 just modern wolves, but the ancestors of what became dogs, which goes back between as about 110 to 161,000 years ago. The sister line of wolf that contributed to what became dogs. So, consensus, there is no consensus as to when that happened. Able to tell that it's old. It was a sister line of wolf, a species of wolf or subspecies, if you will. And that sister line then, as it modified, as it spread, as it went into the habitat, it became genetically modified on its own through nature to be one of those excuse me, one of those animals that was definitely a wolf, but ended up being something a little different than all the other wolf species. And they do have a lot of different morphology and excuse me, intent and intelligence due to their morphology, their size, their environment that they live in, frankly. When you look at, for instance, the southern latitude, the further south or equatorial wolves are, for instance, they generally tend to be smaller than in far northern climates. And so this particular line of wolf that contributed to basically what is modern dogs, some changes that allowed them to be, I'll say, more curious and more cooperative, less fearful, and put two and two together with humans. And that's really where this comes from. So, up until a few years ago, literally a few years ago, when we had the massive National Institute of Health genetics study on canines, we found that, Canis lupus, which is wolves, all types of wolves, that's the generic term for all species of wolves. And we had Canis domesticus, which was dog. But now they've been renamed as Canis lupus familiaris, meaning the familiar wolf, because the genetics are much closer than we ever imagined that they were. So essentially, we're living with wolves. And their mentality, the way their brains are set up, the way they're structured, and the way they changed vastly in the past 15,000 years. That much either. And so we have come up with our own ideas of how to get along human to human, and concepts of global community, nations, states and cities, and our own communities within, and all of those types of things. So we have various levels of belonging because of how our brains are structured and what we understand. Dogs, wolves don't have that understanding. And that's where a lot of, unfortunately, trainer and client frustration comes from, is not understanding the dog's viewpoint. They're not trying to get away with anything. They are not trying to upset you. As a matter of fact, they're just as upset that you aren't responding correctly to what they're trying to tell you. So let's get into this. So what is the meaning? What's the purpose of territory in the first place? If you just roam around and you bump into others of your species or others, predators, etc., you won't live very long. And that's not a very smart way to try to survive. So those individuals or those types of animals that did that ended up not surviving well, unless, of course, they were larger animals in large herds. And then they had the aspect of large herds to protect the individuals, as far as if we have more of us and they kill a few of us, we still live and we go on and we make. That's really how predator-prey aspects go. If you get too many predators and you kill off the prey, well, you know what? You don't survive either. So nature has its own balance that man keeps sticking its hands into and messing up, such as the elimination of the wolf, mainly across the world, and a lot of the environments that animals live in. And so we get an overabundance of prey animals that destroy the environment or get diseased because they're not culled out. So territory itself is part of what makes a species what it is, and a subspecies too. The environment that it's adapted to. So food, water, and shelter are the main things for survival for any type of animal. Some animals carry their own shelter around on their backs. Others have to have area that's safe, that's secure, that they have patrolled, that they've kept others out of. And that's essentially what we're talking about with the predators. Prey tends to, the larger the prey, they can go, large ungulates, for instance, they can go hundreds, even thousands of miles. And in some cases, some of the predators follow those lines of where they go season to season. And but if they run into another predatory area, they're stopped or they have to fight those predators. And it's not like on National Geographic where you constantly do that. You wouldn't live very long doing that. Decimated, because any injury could lead to death or, disablement, certainly permanently. And nature is harsh out there. So food, water, and shelter are the main things, right? Now let's talk about how food is acquired by first wolves and then dogs. Okay. So wolves and their ancestors, they hunted, but there are also other elements, some plant materials, berries. At some points in the year, berries become actually the majority for a short time of a wolf's diet in various areas around the world, mostly northern climates. But those berries help them, first of all, gives them a lot of energy that they need at that time when their prey isn't as available. And so it sustains them through harsh times, basically. And that's what they need. So animals have adapted in their diets and their locations for exactly what they need when they need it, or they wouldn't exist. And that's the difference between each and subspecies of animal. Space is a major element within survival needs. You got food, water, shelter, right? So food is whatever you can catch to eat. And it has to make sense for what you are. And wolves and dogs are predators. They are carnivores. Wolf is a higher level of carnivore than a dog as far as percentage of meat that it needs and protein levels of animal proteins. Water. Well, water has to be available, but even water in a frozen form can be eaten and melts in your mouth and sustains you. Dogs and wolves don't eat, they don't drink that much water compared to how much food that they eat. And part of that is because they get liquids from the food they eat. If you've ever, for instance, put a bunch of hamburger meat in the microwave and in 2 minutes, there's a lot of fluids coming out, right? So that's what they're getting. Water does need to be available for them. in desert climates, the Ethiopian wolf, the Middle East wolf, even the Mexican gray wolf, those wolves are specialized for arid deserts type climates. And they take most of their water sustenance from animals. A lot of those animals, they're killing and eating small animals like voles, anything that's available to them. So they will eat a coyote meal. I'll put it that way. Not the coyote themselves, but what coyotes eat. But they can also they're specialized for larger animals too. And they can take down a larger animal because of the way they hunt and the energy that they have and the speed and the tenacity and their smarts. So as far as shelter goes, let's talk about shelter. So out in the wild, there's no roof over the head. They on a rock shelf where there may be anywhere from 100 to over 180 degrees of area that they are protected from others, anything else, the mountain lion, the bears, all of those things, so that they can have something protecting their back. It's not just about how the numbers that we have, because the numbers may be decimated by a couple of bears coming along. So it's about having cover on your back, as well as being able to control access to where you are, especially when you sleep or you rest in those areas. So that goes back to the amount of space that you need. The shelter also equates to space, and that's the area of the territory itself. How large does that territory need to be to protect you from intrusions? And if you see some of these modern day tracking studies like Voyager's area wolves that are online, if you haven't ever watched those, you should look at some of those to begin understanding how, yes, wolves have their territories and they are separate from another territory and another territory, but there are intrusions into those others as much as a third of the way into the other's territory. Why? Seeing if the others are still there, finding a new mate, all these other things. There's a number of other things why wolves intrude into that space, but they return into their own. So there are little forays out in every direction. Keep track of those guys, just like the others keep track of them. If that one pack of predators isn't able to hold that territory, that's an opportunity if that's a better territory for food, water, and shelter. That's nature. That's the way it goes. That pack may not be able to hold it. It may get pushed off into a different territory. It may find itself completely disbanded and join others or attempt to join others in more successful areas. What are successful areas? Food, water, shelter. Have that as long as the food is available for that amount of predators, you're better off. Okay. Matter to us with dogs. I'll get to that. Okay. So space is necessary. Space equals time. So the larger the space that you have around you, that allows you time to, I'll say, tactically place yourself within your territory that you've claimed, that you have scented with your scent to let everybody know this is ours, it's not yours. Then you have time to respond to that incursion. That's very important. So, how much space you have depends on how much space you're able to cover in distance and time, because you can't protect everything. You can't claim thousands of square miles. impossible. You would spend your entire time running around just trying to keep everybody else out. Don't have our agreements of property rights and ownership and all of those things the way we do. Dogs do not know, wolves do not know. You bring a wolf into your house, they're worried about the neighbors coming over and killing us and taking our property too, because it's right there. That makes no sense to them. Dogs don't know that our neighbors aren't going to come and kill us and take over our property either. So it's only over time and our guidance that they come to accept these little tiny postage stamp sized territories. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So space is very important. And the smaller the space, even with adequate resources of food and water and shelter, it weighs on a dog. And so when you go outward from that, for instance, taking them to a park or something else, that in their mind expands their territory. Well, there's a lot of implications on us in smaller urban, suburban type atmospheres, certainly in apartments and condos and things like that, where we really don't have outdoor space other than totally shared with everybody else. In apartments with Huskies or German Shepherds or Ovcharkas or any LGDs that have no territory to guard or to travel in. And that's a difficult situation, I'll just tell you right up front. There are ways to ameliorate that, but it requires additional purpose, intent, and I'll say knowledge and effort on the human's part to help that dog be happy and satisfied. So, that is one element that larger dogs and dogs that are used to protecting area, you're fighting against nature, having them in a small space. I'll put it that way. So, survival needs still of the wolf. That's the same category as we talked about space. So how much area can you cover, and what amount of space is the maximum you can do and still survive with the right amount of animals in it? In other words, partners for survival, your pack, whether that's human, dog, birds, it doesn't matter what that is. How you present that in that territory, how much can we take and how much can we preserve and protect without wasting all of our energy just running around keeping others out. That doesn't make any sense. That entropy of energy does not work in nature. So you may have a smaller area. So where within that area does it make it possible to have a safe area that's far enough away from other intruders, other predators of any type, that we remain in that spot with adequate resources? That's life. That is it right there. I hope I'm explaining it well enough. If it gets too small, you have no safe space. Now you create an anxious situation with an entire pack of animals. So that's the point. If it's too small, even with the adequate number of resources in that area, you don't ever get rest because you get. So starting to explain why dogs bark out the window at everything going by your street. Adequate to be safe. So the larger area that you have, now you've got to go patrol it. So one of the things that I talk about and we'll talk about is the perimeter and covering the perimeter of your territory. It's very important for dogs because where'd they get it from? Wolves. And that's what they do. They go mark their territory, they mark their area. Everybody wonders why dogs pee on other dog pee, because they're sending signals. This is my area. Are you in it? Do I claim you? Am I warning you? All of those things happen. Okay. That may be a subject matter in future time. Why do dogs pee on each other's stuff? And there's a clue for it right there. Okay. So space is safety as long as it makes sense with the health, the size, the resources, the pack members, and do we have enough time to cover all that area and keep others out and not lose other space. Maneuverability is very important. So the terrain itself, up and down versus flat, undulating, whether you have rivers running through it that are a blockage, all of those types of things. So maneuverability within that territory, that's very important, because that'll either block, hinder, or help you get to other areas. And where does that lie in terms of others, of other predators and other prey? Prey go in and out of our area at various times of the year. And if they go into someone else's territory, do we dare follow them to that territory? And the answer generally is no. Just like we're not going to go into our neighbor's kitchen to eat. Unless they invited us here, but so maneuverability, and then obviously distance itself. So distance has meaning in a number of ways, including for pure survival. If you cannot cover that area in an adequate amount of time then it's too far. If it's not far enough, if that distance is very short, then we have an issue of, once again, safety and space. The reason mountain lions can exist within a different environment than wolves can, or dogs, is because they have silently with ease and take care of those animals that walk shelves this wide and climbing up vertical. They have that ability to do so too. That's why mountain lions tend to be on the mountains in those types of environments. There are mountain lions, cougars, whatever you want to call them, pumas, depending on where you are, all over. There's some around here, Dallas-Fort Worth area here. So movement is very important. So mental and physical health through movement, that is confirmation of being alive. That's having the purpose. If you can move, you're alive. And that's essentially it. So that mental, physical health, being able to move within your environment and have different experiences, being able to very important thing for the dog, okay? Because they do not know we have a deed of trust on our house. And the pro-sociality of those included within our space, within our territory. Even the prey know whose territory they're in because of the scent and smell. That's an idea that people really need to understand, is the prey for a predator knows which territory it's in, and they can also avoid a particular territory by going in the DMZ, no man's land, between two different packs of predators. sometimes, as I discovered, sometimes those territories overlap, but not at the same time. Otherwise, bad conflict happens and things die. So they try to avoid that. Am I coming through okay for you guys? All right.
Period. Real quick,
Yes,
just
ma'am.
to FYI, you're cutting in and out a little bit here and there. A word or two at times is gets missed, but for the most part, we're getting the content of what you're saying. If it gets any worse, I'll hold up a sign and let you know.
Thank you. So the aspect, what I'm talking about on all of this, and again, this is about the wolf, but it also relates directly in a different way, in a different environment. And they have to put up with us, whereas the wolves don't. So all of that is about pro-sociality. And pro-sociality is, that's how you survive. Pro-sociality, for those of you who've never had any of my courses, is the proper aspect of sociality itself. And sociality is the drive, desire, need to be part of a larger group, whether that's the same species or other species. And, cooperative animals such as humans, birds, et cetera, those can live together as a pro-social group in the same territory without killing each other. So those animals, all of that creates that pro-sociality. Now, the thing I do benefits the others, but you have to think about it not from your own personal standpoint, but from their standpoint too, how they see it. If it doesn't make sense to them, that it's not of benefit to them. Whatever you do should benefit them too, not just yourself, not just some. And that's something you study, you should study the rest of your life. Okay, so let's go. That was all survival needs. Now let's go to difference of male and female within that territorial act. Of those times, and obviously wolves are, they go in estrus once a year, dogs twice a year generally. And so there's always a cycle in there of the female in a bearing mode. Males then, for that territory, that's a difference of where does the female stay for the purpose of pro-sociality, of creating the next generation so that our species survives, versus the male having to go out and forage and female does too, and protect. The female also has those roles, but it's basically if the female dies, the species dies. So those roles are very important in understanding male-female aspects. It's not that one's lesser than the other. Matter of fact, more important. That's the one that mainly helps the species to survive beyond themselves. So, and that's where those roles come into play. And that does have to do with dogs too, and the way they think and the way they behave. So that also goes to now, where is the placement of the den? Affected by terrain within your territory that protects that the female and the pups in this case, during the most vulnerable periods when they're non-ambulatory during those couple of months, frankly. And until until at least 8, 9 months, even a year, yearlings are just now starting to come around to the size where they can follow the pack into a fight, or frankly into catching their food. They're not very effective yet because they're not fully grown. They don't have the brains yet. They're testing things out and learning at that point of how to survive. And so keeping in mind when you've got a puppy, for instance, in your house and what its roles are at a certain point, it doesn't start even thinking that towards survival in that way. It shouldn't till about a year of age and up to about 2.5 years of age when it finally matures physically, sexually, and mentally. Small dogs a little sooner, maybe 20 months to 24 months. Larger dogs, 2.5 years. Extra large dogs, maybe even 3 years. That doesn't mean it's fully mature yet, but it's close. And so it can act on behalf of everybody in those terms. So age has a bearing on these things as well. Territory means to them. The younger you are, the more territory means safety. And so you stay more or less in the center. You start just like everybody else, you start foraying out within your own territory. If you make the mistake of going into someone else's territory, you don't survive very long. And frankly, in the wild, wolf pups getting to a year of age, only about 40% do survive to 1 year of age. So depending on the specific species, but that's generally that's what nature is. So the ones that stay within their territory and are able to stay out of the way, not get disease, et cetera, not do something stupid, they're the ones that survive. So territory itself is self-defining for survival. Placement of the den in a safe spot within your territory is extremely important. So the purpose and the meaning of the den is the survival of that pack. And the survival of the pack is more important than the survival of the individual. The survival of the species, genetically, memory. So it goes up chain essentially as the most important thing is the survival of the species. That's life. That's what it tries to do, is replicate. Now, the first life form that ever was on Earth is still here, just in a number of different forms, animals and plants, because it replicated itself, and we are its progeny essentially. So let's change to dogs specifically so that you understand what territory means to these guys. Let's translate it from the wild to just our wild house. And so survival to a dog is not much different than survival to a wolf. They have different actors and players within it, and street dog, which are close to 2/3 or 3/4 of dogs on Earth are street dogs. They're simply those brown dogs on all 5 continents that dogs exist. Streets, they have 1 or 2 pack members because they have small territories compared to, for instance, wolves. They don't have to travel as far, and they're generally around humans, which are extremely wasteful in food and a number of things. So they have food, water, and shelter available to them generally, or they wouldn't exist. And that's close to 3/4 of all dogs on Earth, of the more than 1 billion dogs on Earth. So other dogs with them, survival to a dog in a household, let's say, so in a home. And how can I put this? They don't think much differently than that wolf in the wild. So as far as territory goes, it's the same thing. Food, water, shelter. And actually, shelter is the closest and strongest association with survival for territory directly. So your shelter, your den is your home. It's your indoors, which is why dogs get so upset when somebody knocks on their door or rings the doorbell or the phone rings. It's an intrusion. It's an intruder. It's a potential threat. And so the first thing dogs, if you were a wolf in the wild and you were in the den, you would do everything in your power to get that out of there. You'd kill it, you'd die for that, et cetera, et cetera. That's where dogs are coming from. That's their mentality, guys. Do they, this all comes back to, and I'll repeat this all comes back to trust of the human. And humans get frustrated, which is an emotion. They get angry, frustrated, etc. if their dog repeats that behavior that they think is antisocial to humans coming up. And that frustration then causes the dog to not trust you because you lost control of yourself. And if you lost control of your emotions, you're not trustworthy to handle anything. The only thing you can control is your own reaction to things that happen. If you don't have control of that, you've got control of nothing. And that's the way dogs look at it. It's also the way I look at it. So controlling yourself first and influencing the dog second is the most important thing. Dogs are not going to follow someone, an individual of any type that's anxious. Think of a dog following a dog that's out of control. They don't. They won't follow you either in those situations. They may rely on you for certain things, but they honestly don't trust you. So a lot of the territorial aspects of the conflict between humans and dogs in our own homes is that misunderstanding. Like I say, emotions to another human is very impressive, but to a dog, it has the opposite effect. You have broken the trust with them because you're not words to them. Survival to us is how others see us. What shoes do I wear today? What car do I drive? Which neighborhood do I live in? Those are how we see our survival, our success in survival. That's not what a dog thinks about at all. Okay, so we use the majority of our brain for our cultural aspects, human to human, and not survival as a dog predator against another predator, frankly. So they see these intrusions into our territories, our defined territories, especially inner workings of our den, which is our house. The second they enter that door, they're inside that inner sanctum. So other dogs with them, whether they trust those dogs or not. So for instance, a lot of people foster dogs, don't they? What happens when upset happens? They may turn on another dog that either becomes anxious or that dog turns on them. This is all because of survival instinct of, my God, the whole world is coming to an end and you guys aren't taking care of this. And so that anxiety turns on each other because they don't have that pro-social pact It hasn't been created yet. So those first few weeks, you really have to, I will say, manage your emotions and show that you can handle this. So the dogs actually look to you for your behavior. That also has to do with you defining the territory. I had a station with a trainer this afternoon about exactly that. An LGD, very large LGD, loses its cool, so to speak, when anybody comes up, those or anything else in their place. And understanding that that's an issue for that dog because number one, it's an LGD. So what's its mindset? I have to protect the territory. Where is the territory? Well, we'll get to that, how that dog sees that. So survival to a dog is protecting the territory. Other dogs with them also, whether they trust them or not. And even neighbor dogs, if they finally, if they get if they have behaviors that are similar that they can both agree with, then they may have a buddy next door, but that doesn't happen very often. So humans in the household are part of that equation. How well do you do at recognizing that your dog is concerned about the territory that you're allowing others in, including dogs, other dogs, humans, whatever else comes in, or sane little children that run around and make noise and total chaos. They come over and do that. Okay. Doesn't make sense to them. Just doesn't make sense. They learn to accept certain levels. Most dogs do. Some dogs never do. So food, there's a difference of going out and hunting, which is one of the reasons. Well, there's a difference in going out and having to hunt for your food, earn it. That's the main purpose of having that pack territory, having enough in that territory to have food and water and shelter in it. And the act of going out and surviving by doing that. We have taken away that ability of dogs to understand that purpose because water is available to them, food's automatically available. So it's one of the reasons why I teach my trainers, you have to go on the hunt, a replicated hunt by different actions, not actually going out and killing something, every time you feed your dogs. So you go out, it only takes 5 to 20 minutes to do certain actions that we do. And there's over 20 different categories of things that you can do. And that replicates the actions of going on a hunt, the physical ability to go out, go through territory, through terrain, etc. Their own property. It replicates the hunt, and the celebration is coming in and then getting fed. That's what working for your food is. In any amount of territory, and there's no purpose in you being around other than just setting the food down and providing the water. By that, you're really not an important pack member. Just for that purpose, yes, place the food down. You have no other involvement as far as they know in it. You didn't go out and kill that, bring it to them. They didn't observe anything except you pulling it out of a bag or the refrigerator. Okay. Water itself, we have it in our environment, in our society, we have it available 24/7. I have never retained water except for medical reason from a dog because it's natural out there. They can find it. So I have it available for my dogs always. Food is earned by us going out as a pack together, not as individuals, as a pack together. And, you know, when you have between 12 and 21 dogs and you have to go out as a pack all together, that gets a little difficult over time. So, but we used to do a lot of things together, and, you know, we'd go down the street, around the park, et cetera, and do different things with dogs on leashes. Most dogs on leashes. Shelter. So once again, this is for dogs here, because food and water just magically appear to them unless you're doing these other things. Shelter is the strongest association with survival for territory. That's why it's so important to them to define their territory. Who should define your territory? You should, to the dog in the way it understands. Don't allow them to define your territory. That's where all conflict happens. Okay. Once again, we go to space. So how much space do you have? Front yard, backyard, you know, is it fenced? Is it not fenced? Do you have, you know, what's the story, 2-story, 3-story? Do you have an apartment? You know, you live in an 80-story building and you have a little flat up there somewhere? Your territory, that balance of what the amount of space and the ability to move in different environments is very important for their mental, physical health. Mental side of that is the complexities between each of those areas, just like you would have complexities out there in the wild. Okay, you go over this rock, around this, down this stream, over these, into the woods, all of these different things that you would do naturally. You have the ability to replicate that within your home. So every dog that I ever brought home, I walked them around on leash, front yard, inside every room they were allowed to go into, downstairs, upstairs, out in the backyard. I walked them around the perimeter of each of these, and perimeter walks are saviors of your dog and your own sanity. And if you don't do that, if you don't show them the end of the territory and reinforce that over and over again, they're going to have massive problems. Okay. Once again, we go back to movement within this. So space and movement, space and time. So space, time, and movement are very important. And, you know, any dog is going to go absolutely nuts in a tiny little space that doesn't have any environmental changes whatsoever. There's no difference between this room and that room in density and light and whatever else. You have to, brains are pattern seeking, and brains need to have complexities instead of all sameness. You will go nuts. Okay. If I put you in a white anechoic chamber, white room, anechoic chamber, you would not last 2 hours. You'd be literally crawling, scratching at the floor. I know, because experiments were done. It's one of the things that certain agency used to like to do back in the 50s and 60s. Okay. They experimented a lot with a lot of things, and that was one of them. So the brain can't not handle, your brain, their brain cannot handle sanitary, absolute sanitary environment. It has to have complexities. It has to have differences. Right? It has to have different light, different meaning, different locations, different smells. All of these things are important in your territory for the health of that dog, mentally and physically. Movement through that and the routine that you set up, indoor routine versus outdoor routine, different routine out in the front than out in the back if you have a front back type thing or a side yard. Okay, they're different rules, different routines. You have to reinforce that so that the dogs have that variety of things. Okay. Doesn't have to be house and the back of my house environmentally are massively different, because the back of our house gets the morning sun and therefore warms up quickly. It's protected by other houses and fence and trees. So there's not much wind. Even in the winter, I can go out in the back in short sleeves. The second I walk out the front door, though, when the wind's blowing down from the north, it's really darn cold. So massive differences in just front to back. Those are things that you have to recognize and realize that that difference helps that mental health of that dog. So those complexities are very important within territory. But again, defining territory is your job. Okay. And then, confirmation again of being alive with purpose. So this is our territory. It needs to be defined by you. Okay, we're past page 1. That was an hour. Hang on. Human factor of responses, emotion versus no emotion. Do you have it or do you not? And it is control of yourself. That's huge factor, because if you can't even control your own emotions within your own territory, that dog has to take over for its own survival and yours. It's looking out for you too. Believe it or not, that behavior is pro-social on its part to try to help you too. Okay. So now the other factor with dogs is the vision aspect. And while dogs don't rely on vision for anything except the corroboration of what they smell, which we're going to get to, vision is the only thing they're capable of doing out that front window or front door. If you haven't defined where the edge of that is, where the edge of the territory is, then that dog surveys, all it sees is, all it can see is territory. It defines its territory. So your reinforcement of the edge of the territory is very important. When I let Bosch out with me in the front, he is not on leash. He will not go anywhere. He goes to the edge of exactly where I've defined our front yard territory and the curb, and he stays within it. He can explore all he wants within that area, and he rushes out to the edge and checks around and sniffs and makes sure nobody else has gone and peed on his pee. And I go over, I open the back door of the vehicle. I say load up, he comes running over and jumps in, and we go on our way, or he stays there and I wash my car or whatever it is we're doing out front. Okay. Same thing with coffee or any others. So vision becomes territorial familiarity unless you define that edge. That's part of the problem. That's why territorial boundaries are so important, and that perimeter walk, that definition. Dog starts to step over onto your neighbor's yard. That's not ours. Come back. And if your dog trusts you, it's not about crushing the dog into compliance. It's about trust. That's what relationship-based training and behavior modification is all about. It's about the relationship. Are you important enough for the dog to respond to you in kind? Okay. So goes to the edge, you go, yeah, don't take that step over. Goes, okay, good boy, good girl. That's it. That's territorial familiarity. But it's looked out the window and saw that UPS truck going by every day, or FedEx or Amazon or that mailman, and it barks and it, alert, 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 somebody's in our territory. You haven't defined your territory. Somebody walks by on the sidewalk. Well, that's inside of our territory, isn't it? Well, you go look and go, yeah, it's okay, Toph. Don't worry about it. It's over. It's done. So now your dogs see what you're concerned about. Direction of travel is very important. If someone's walking along in front of your property doing this and not turning and facing an incursion into your property, you guide your dog. You set up an exercise if you need to. And you say, okay, they're not coming into our territory, they're passing by. I don't care. If they come towards us, then I care. That's the difference. So direction of travel, speed of travel, of course, excites a predatory mind. A truck is going to go a lot faster than a person walking along or a person walking their dog. Okay. So that some of that aspect is now, what is that window represent for that dog? Does it have enough mental and physical stimulation within the territory that you've defined, or is it looking out for more stimulation? That's all. Also, part of your job is what is asked to be with you. You made that choice. It's your obligation to that dog, just like obligation to take care of your child. It's no different as far as obligation, guys. Okay. So, that's also territorial expansion and vision. Okay. So territorial familiarity, territorial expansion, and territorial exploration. Those are natural things that predators, especially canine predators as a pack, do. Can we take that extra territory, that space across the street from us? So that's one of the elements where you have to stay steadfast about, no, we're not going next door. We're not going across the street for that. Okay. And this is where travel with dogs, in other words, get your dog in your vehicle or you walk down the street, you're expanding their extraterritorial jurisdiction. If a dog has gone with you in a certain way, at a certain distance, 3 times, that becomes its ETJ as well. It becomes familiar with that. If you haven't run into other predators in that area, or you have, and it's regular and you agree to, dog parks, okay? A park with other people in it, with dogs, et cetera, and you go multiple times and there are always different people there, different dogs, but you recognize that, then they become comfortable that nobody's going to attack us, so this must be a neutral area, okay? That's a unique, I will say, very unique aspect of dogs agreeing to go with us in our mentality and our agreements, okay? So the expansion and exploration is visual first. That's the thing that you can see, okay? Now let's talk about scent from this territorial standpoint. So in our domestic environment here, you should know which direction your prevailing winds are coming from. Okay. And here where I live, it comes from I will say southeast. So almost due south, but slightly east of due south. So it comes up from essentially the Gulf of Mexico almost all the time. And then there will be a cold front, Canadian cold front, wind shifts around to the north. There may be a Pacific front that comes across, everything comes from the west. Rarely does anything ever come from the east. So my dog's familiarity with scent miles away, that they recognize when we travel into those areas, is mainly to the south, sometimes from the west and sometimes from the north. So they become familiar with these areas. They're most familiar with the area south of us, which goes for miles. That's where their scent pickup is. So that's their natural thing. When you move with your dog to a different area across an east or west, certainly, or south of where all that scent is coming from, dog does not recognize that territory, is not comfortable in it. It's an entirely different universe for them. You have to recognize that moving in a different direction than the prevailing wind or the normal winds is a unique process for them. And that you would have to go several times, more than 3 times, for them to become natural with that. Okay. So familiarity of scent is very, very important for them. So anywhere within your general, say, neighborhood, they smell the same scents they always smell. That's why that's part of their extraterritorial jurisdiction as well. They also pick up other dogs in the neighborhood, not just by scent, but sound. When they have a visual on them, they know them by those, but still, it's not part of your pack yet. Okay? So those explorations that happen visually, scent-wise, etc., contribute to issues of dogs barking and being upset about anybody around your territory. So let's look at perimeter definitions. Okay, perimeter definitions of domestic dogs. Guardians. This is where LGDs, herding, guardian type dogs, those types of animals, they are used to massive territories. And so they project out that they're responsible for those. Anything they can see, essentially, if you do not define that territory, where is the edge of that territory? For an LGD, livestock guardian dog of large size, Anatolian shepherds, of Charcas, those types of animals, having them in an urban, suburban, even exurban environment is almost torture. Yeah, we love them to death. They're all that stuff, but their lives are not fulfilled. They're consciously anxious at all these intrusions into what their mind interprets too. They're herders. Anything that moves, they want to control it, slow it down. Anything that they see in their territory, and that's as far as they can see. Scent trackers, beagles, bloodhounds, a lot of different types of animals that do, or dogs that do scent tracking. They want to go out there out front and satisfy and follow that scent wherever it leads them. To them, territory is different in the way they think about it because they're traveling through territory, and scent trackers with that singular mindset humans did, because we were there to help agree and track with them to cut down prey or whatever else. Okay. Again, these urban environments are not conducive for scent trackers to be very happy. So territory, that postage stamp territory we call our home and property, doesn't work very well for them. That's where you have to displace them, allow a park or a national green area where you go not just once or twice or 3 times, but you need several places that you go that allow that to change over time. It rains, other things come along, et cetera, so it mixes up that. So that becomes an extraterritorial jurisdiction of yours with them. And those are important things to do too. So you're really claiming new territories out here through cars or walk or whatever else. That's important for dogs. They need to travel. If they're contained within this tiny little home, the people that I worked with high content, mid to high content wolf dogs, or literally wolves in their homes, reading them the Riot Act and understanding what they really have, what we consider a crate to a dog, the crate to a wolf is a 1,600 square foot area. That's the equivalent. So that's an entirely different animal, and I highly recommend you do not ever do that. Okay. None of you. I don't care how romantic it looks. That's not good for you or that animal, period. And they shouldn't be creating wolf dogs. Of them, work with tons of them, hundreds of them, literally. So then you got the hunters. Okay, so what do hunters want to do? Well, they want to track, they want to jump, they want to run, they want to do all these things. They will herd, so they do all of these aspects. There's no space for them in your environment. So you have to take them out to other transferred locations to be able to do some of that, et cetera, et cetera. So you have domestic dogs that have different mentalities of aspects of wolves, and they were picked by us to be a specific type of I'll say environmental use. Okay. So primal dogs. Let's talk about some of the primal ancient breed dogs. Siberian Huskies. Thank you, Angela. Siberian Huskies, Malamutes, Eskimo dogs, American Eskimo dogs, these, some of the res dogs up in northern Canada, Fitz dogs, Screaming Sledge dogs, all of those ancient breed mentalities, their idea of territory and northern breed Spitz dogs, the original dogs, is how far can I run in a month? 60 miles a day, every day. That's their territory. That's their concept of territory. They don't have set territories. Well, the animals travel thousands of miles. I used to tell my Siberian Husky and Malamute, Akita, well, Akita's different. Malamute, Siberian Husky, especially clients, that they're not running away from their home. They're going to see the rest of their 10,000 square mile territory. That's literally what they're thinking. I got to go see the rest of my territory and visit everything else. And they're not running away. They look back 3 days later and wonder why you're not following them. That's all. You didn't join them. They think so. The type of dog that you have sees territory in a different way. And those dogs living in even 10 acres just isn't enough for them. It'd be like you living your entire life in a closet. So those behaviors are different. So how do we use all of this to our benefits, and train versus learn? So training involves you showing the dog territorial aspects. It also requires of you your obligation to take those dogs to different environments to have that mental stimulation and physical stimulation. You must be involved in it. Otherwise, you're not part of their pack. You're a low member, not a high member, by just letting them do what they want. So if you don't involve yourself in those behaviors, not of importance in that pack, okay? You may think you are because you feed them. That's not the main thing. So they're using genetic memory. And that genetic memory, if you understand how that particular animal thinks about territory, sees territory, then you can use that to your benefit to say, okay, our territory happens to stop here, right? But we also have this over here that we go visit often, okay? You can have defined alert and defined threat. So defined alert and defined threat, you set up exercises to show the dog what you would be concerned about and alerted for. Otherwise, They don't need to. And those are two different things, alert and threat. So alert may be a, that's exactly what Toffee does for me. She'll look out the window and she'll go, I'll repeat the same thing to her as I'm walking up. Okay. So now she knows I'm responding. Walk up and go, good girl, no problem. Don't worry about it. She's fine. She walks away. Defined threat, she knows if someone's coming up, that bark alerts me, hey, 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 I'm calling the pack. I'll go, I got this. Don't worry about it, Toph. She'll stop. Those are the types of things that are actually helpful. We can use those things to our benefit. Also, I don't give that signal if someone's walking up to the door trying to sell something. So Toffee's going, and Bosch goes, too. So all I got to do is crack the door open, and most of the people are walking away. Never mind. So, I'm sorry, I can't talk right now. Good luck. Boom. So I don't get solicitors. They must all talk to each other because we haven't seen any in a long time. So that definitely helps me. Okay. So the inner den, what does your house or building represent? That's the inner sanctum of pack survival. That's why when somebody knocks on the door, rings, etc., that is the most severe alert possible of, hey, somebody's trying to get in and kill us. That's what they're thinking. Okay. So you have a pack alert. You have mentalities of different types of dogs too. Okay. The husky is going to woo, 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 and invite them in and show them where the silver is so they can steal it. That's what a husky does. They're not protectors. German Shepherd's going to knock them down, stand over the top of them as they chew the arm off. Those sorts of things. So you've got anxious dogs, you've got dominant dogs, you've got uncertain dogs. All of those are not good in the way that they behave about actual interactions with other humans, dogs, etc., etc. So you must work with those animals, set up scenarios with trusted people, dogs, etc., to teach them what you expect. Otherwise, they don't know. Their mentality is this is all about survival. They're coming to your inner den. So the place of the human within the order of the pack. Every human thinks they're right, and every human thinks they're on top of the pack up here when 99% are down here. You address this much of what's important to a dog and think you're in charge. Okay, because you live over here and the dog lives over here, and the dog looks at you 99% of the time and says, you're an idiot, I'm taking over, I gotta survive. Okay. So fencing, let's talk about the last thing and then I'll stop. Fencing, so open fencing, it can be an anathema, it can be a help. Open fencing to visually look across other areas actually settles dogs down. Now I can see threats from far away. Feral dogs I've had that would easily escape, jump over a 6-foot fence. I've gone to places that were, acre fenced in, chain link fence, but the fence was only 3 feet high. They never bothered to jump over it because they could see, 1,000 feet in each direction. So to them, that was okay. They could see all of that. So open fencing can be great, or if that dog next door, and here's the problem, when you look at where predators have territory and the space that they create between each other as no man's land, that's what allows them to survive and not come into conflict. When we've got a fence that one dog is on this side and one is on this side, that is a territory, that's a defined territorial boundary between this pack and that pack. And that's the worst thing about living in an urban environment, frankly, for a dog, is that next door neighbor dog that barks at us and we bark at them. And Rarely are you going to convince your dog unless you're very much a pro that that's not good to bark at that dog next door. Okay. So, and yeah, I've done it many times. We've got a dog next door that comes out, poor guy, all he can do is bark, go around and bark when he's out in the backyard. Toffee doesn't like it, but I keep her away from the fence. I just go, hey, just leave the poor guy alone. He's lonely. Stands there and watches until he goes in, but she doesn't bark back. So. Closed fencing, where he sees little slats through and sees, action and stuff, so barks at it just to try to get interest. Okay. So boundary definitions are very important. And what I do is, and this is tough for a lot of dogs, especially ones that are protective, herding, LGDs, those type, where you have to back up the boundary into your territory. Now I can walk in there to show my dogs it's not out of fear. We're not giving space to that dog because we're afraid of it and it's taking our territory. But I don't want my dogs in there. So I walk in there along the fence and I go, hey buddy, or across the fence, through the fence. And so they have a different understanding that I'm giving him space because he needs that help. But for my dogs, I don't have to give him space. That's still our territory. That's part of the leadership aspect of things too. Okay. So threat perceptions is very important on fencing, whether a dog accepts another or not. And so introductions are very important. If you can get a neighbor who has a dog to agree to you with introductions parallel to each other, they don't have to meet, they don't have to play, they can go parallel to each other and understand, okay, this is our edge, that's your edge, everything's fine, and we break and go off. So that's a repeat thing. I'm not going to get into the details of all that and what I used to work with, but it does work. Okay. And then scent areas and densities with fences. Okay. Well, wolves can spray 25 or 30 feet. Why in the old sanctuaries and conservation sites that I advised, the fences were, if they were under 25 feet away from each other, they had stress between the wolf over here and the wolf over there, because that male could spray 25 feet easily and the other one back into the other's territory. So they had a constant fight. And that's a lot of stress on a captured animal like that. So my advice was always to separate minimum of 25 feet. The one place that didn't do that I was actually very impressed with was the conservation site there at Divide, Colorado, up from west of Colorado Springs, up in the mountains. They did it right. They had wolves next to each other, literally the next fence right there. One fence between them, that was it. But they rotated all the animals to make them one pack. They never had them together, but the scent so they all felt together as a location, which was frankly brilliant. So, okay, I'm going to stop there because I can talk forever, as you guys know. Sorry. I hope this has been a little bit helpful. It's trying to get into why do dogs behave the way they do? Why do they think the way they do? That's really, everything is about the why. Okay. It's not about, and if you know why, you can start reaching that animal and teach them in a certain way that that's acceptable, this isn't, and we're not at threat by not addressing this in the way you have been doing it. Okay. You can trust me. That's what it's about. Okay. So yes, ma'am.
Sorry. There's a couple of questions that have popped through. So if anybody wants to stay on, I feel like, there's just two. that I've seen so far, but very good questions. So I'd like to pose those to you. How much space does an LGD need to be content with the space outside? Seeing a lot of LGDs being adopted into homes with small yards, so walking to get exercise helps, but then they think the whole neighborhood belongs to them.
Yes, and, so what happens? It's yard and home are the inner den. So where you walk is very important. And one of the things I explained, I can look out my window right now and literally half a block away is a 6-lane, 45-mile-an-hour divided street, very busy street with cars going up and down all the time. I have never walked my dogs that direction. We go out and we go the other direction, up the street, around the corner, a few blocks to a private park behind our neighborhood, and that's where they go to. When I had behavior case dogs years ago, that's the only direction we would go. I forgot what happened. One of my kids or something opened the door and one of the dogs and went down the street that way. I knew where I could find them, so no problem. Drove up, killed. So I met it not very far down that street, went just in front of it, stopped, opened the back door, went like this, dog jumps in, we go for a little ride, come back to the house. So where you define that territory or the pathway to it is very important, okay? The pathway was just the transference to get to the park where you slow down, you get all those activities done. So the park itself became, and that park is rarely used by anybody because we've got a fairly small neighborhood, 177 houses or something like that. And so that park is rarely used. When someone's in there, they're fairly far away. So I can use that all the time. Those are the types of places that you need to transfer for an LGD like that to be able to feel like they've got space. Okay, I hope that helps a little bit because, your even 3,000 or 4,000 square foot house, if you had one that large, and your quarter or half acre lot is nothing for that dog.
Right. Okay, one more question. If a dog shows interest in events outside the window, but not responding to it, looking at it, but no barking or sound, are they still considering things outside as part of their territory?
Good question. Is the dog anxious about it, not making noise? Is it anxious? Is it excited? Is it just calm and looking out? So it may be curious. It may still consider it part of its ETJ. But it may just be curious. So it's calm, it's confident, it's a confident dog. It doesn't have any problems. It's looking out and it sees something out there. It may wish to go out there and encounter it and see what it is, see how it interacts, but it may not too. So it's never a simple answer, guys. There's not one thing. It's thousands of layers of things of how that dog sees it. So I could go down a list of a lot of things of what a dog with that behavior would be thinking about. So I hope.
And what bubbles up for me too, just as well is understanding that dog through its actions and generally what is the intent in the brain of that dog in that moment.
Yeah.
Because same dog, different situation happening outside could change the dynamic of what it may perceive as its territory or just observing. Yeah.
Exactly. And some dogs are very patient. In other words, they would not react at all inside, knowing their intelligence, knowing that they can't get out there to that.
Right.
You take the dog out, it may respond very
Swiftly.
yes, and surprise you.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Okay.
so don't be fooled. Yeah, there's lots of reasons. Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, when do we have, matter of fact, so we've got pilo erection in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Okay. We've got personal, gosh, I can't even read that. I'll figure it out. I was trying to see when we had
Our next Q&A.
our Q&A. And
It
I
comes
don't
up in April.
Oh, it does?
I
Ah,
think
there
so.
it is. Okay, yeah, the 20th. You're right.
Okay.
You're right. Okay. Yeah, we've got one in April and one in July. Haven't set the one for the end of the year yet. So, okay.
Yeah, the April one is April 20th.
Okay. So March 20th and April 17th are the next two.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. All right, guys. Well, I hope that helps in some way. I feel like that wasn't as deep a dive as I wanted to go. It covered more breadth than depth. I seem to be doing more of that lately, and these are just very much more broad subjects than you would think. So, again, I hope you got something out of that helps in your particular case. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
you guys appreciate you. All right, good night.
Bye. Have a good evening.